All right, good morning. My name is Dodson. I'm with the Kodiak Regional Aquaculture Association. I'm going to talk to you about Spiridon Lake, a success story. This is one of Ron's favorite projects, I think, so he was pretty excited for us to come talk about it. Before I get into the project itself, I just wanted to give a little overview on what KRAA is. Many of you from Alaska are probably familiar with the Aquaculture Associations, but some of you may not be if you're from out of state or from Canada. So we are one of several private nonprofit aquaculture associations that are sanctioned by the state of Alaska. Prince William Sound is one. There's a couple in the southeast. Cook Inlet. We formed in 1983, so we were a little later in the game. Those others formed in the 70s. We are governed by a board of directors. They're all volunteers. We have a fairly small board of 15 members, most of which are commercial fishermen, but we do have some seats for subsistence users, sport fishermen, marketers, as well as processors. Here's a little map of Kodiak. For those of you that maybe aren't too familiar, this is the Shellicop Strait. Cook Inlet is up here, Gulf of Alaska down here. Our main office, our administrative office, is in the city of Kodiak, which is on Kodiak Island. Our admin staff, as well as our research and monitoring staff, are in the administrative office. We also have a hatchery up on Fog Neck Island called Katoy Bay Hatchery. That's a state-owned hatchery, but we operate it. It was built in the 50s, and then in the 60s, after the earthquake and the tidal wave kind of destroyed most of the hatchery. It was rebuilt by the state, and we took over operations in the late 80s, early 90s. Pillar Creek Hatchery, where Al's the manager, he talked a little bit about that yesterday, is also a state-owned facility. It was built much earlier, or much later. It's a pretty recent hatchery. It was built in the 90s, early 90s, and we took ownership of that immediately. So our hatchery program is pretty diverse between the two facilities. You can see we do sockeye at both facilities as well as coho at both facilities. Katoy Bay Hatchery is our major production facility, so we're permitted for 215 million pink salmon eggs, 36 million chum eggs, 2.3 million coho eggs, and about 850,000 sockeye salmon eggs. Pillar Creek is permitted for roughly 22 million sockeye eggs, but we do far fewer than that. Most of our sockeye programs are based on, for lack of a better word, prescription or a stocking goal given to us by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And so it's really contracted to what we could or potentially could incubate there. Our coho, king, and rainbow trout programs are more geared towards sport fishing, and we do those through a contract that we have with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game Sport Fish Division. Oops. There we go. So again, just for reference, these are the three largest lakes on Kodiak Island. The largest is Karluk Lake, and it is a natural producer of salmon. The second largest is Fraser Lake, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later. That wasn't a salmon producing stream. There is a barrier falls there, but in the 50s they put in a fish ladder, and now that is a naturalized sockeye salmon lake. And the project we're going to be talking about today, right now, is Spiridon Lake, and that is the third largest lake on the island, and it is also barriered, so there are no natural producing salmon in that lake. So here's a nice aerial shot of Spiridon Lake. It's about 74 miles west of the city. It's on the Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge. So there are some different things that we have to do when we're involved with the feds. We do work under a permit that is obtained by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game through the Department of the Interior. So there are some different stipulations that we have to do because we are in a National Wildlife Refuge and we are putting fish into a lake that didn't have fish in it before. There are three waterfalls in the outlet of the lake, which is called Telrod Creek. And what we will do, and I'll get into that a little bit later, is we help the fish when they're leaving the lake bypass those waterfalls. We do provide limnology data to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game on Spiridon Lake. We do collect limnology data on about 20 different lakes across the whole archipelago. So we have a pretty extensive water monitoring program. Most of those are focused towards places where we do release sockeye salmon. And like I said, that data is given back to us in the form of stocking recommendations for those lakes. So how do we get the fish to Spiridon Lake? Well, as Al pointed out yesterday, we do remote egg takes, and the stock for Spiridon Lake is Sultry Lake. That's a late run stock. Al and his crew will go out there in September to collect eggs, and I want to thank him for letting me tag along this year. It was really fun and enjoyable. I got out of the office and actually got to touch fish for a little bit, so it was really cool. We collect roughly enough fish to stock about 2.5 million eggs this year, or 2.5 million fry this coming year. Those eggs are flown via beaver on floats to the Trident seaplane basin, and then they're trucked to Pillar Creek Hatchery. Here you can see a picture of the facility up here. They're incubated, hatched out, and then the fry portion are reared to about 0.4 grams, and then they're flown to the lake, again in a beaver, at about 100 grams per trip, 100 grams of fish per, 100 kilograms of fish per trip, in about a 250-gallon tank. So those fish are flown, the plane lands on the lake, and then gravity feeds the tank of fish into the lake. We used to airdrop those fish, but the plane that did that is about 2 hours away, and its costs have risen. It's more expensive just to fly the plane down and back without even releasing fish than just doing it that way. So we've gone to the beaver, and it's worked out pretty well. The second part of that project that we've just now started recently here, I'd say for brood year 2010, is a smolt project. So a portion of those fish, like I said, will be flown to the lake, but then starting from brood year 2010, the rest of the fish are held over. You can see here, get this up here. These are raceways under this roof, under these windows. There's 16 of them, and Al and the group will rear those fish to smolt. So the remaining fish, anywhere between 300,000 and 650,000 fish will be reared to smolt. And then the following year, they're flown out to where Telrod Creek empties into Telrod Cove. And they'll put these fish in these net pens here, you can see. And those net pens were designed by the crew at Pillar Creek so they can completely be broken down, put in a beaver. We use beavers a lot. And flown to the site, set up by the crew, deployed, anchored, and then when the plane shows up, again, a beaver load of fish, they're gravity fed into the net pens. Now, when we first started this, I was talking to Al, we were at about 8 grams a smolt. Here with recent temperature changes and early hatching and so forth, those fish right now in the hatchery are 15 grams. We haven't even released them yet. So last year we were about 69 flights, and it looks like we'll be pretty close to that again this year. So that portion of it was kind of developed to circumvent the fact that we can only put so many fish in the lake, right? So now we'll be able to complement that smolt migration coming out of the lake with just about as many fish released from smolt as are coming out of the lake. So that's pretty new. We're still evaluating that project. Hopefully it'll pan out for us. And I'll get into this a bit later, but our survival rates in the lake are so good that even if we're half that, the smolt will probably be worth it. So here's releases from the beginning of the project in 2015. You can see, started off releasing quite a few fish. The hope was that you'd be able to put several million, if not up to 8 to 10 million fish into the lake. The limnology results showed that this didn't really support that. So we started getting, you can see in the gold bar, we started getting stocking recommendations from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and that's tapered down quite a bit, and it's kind of nice that it's sort of leveled off. It really makes things easy to kind of anticipate how many eggs we maybe taking the following year, and so when we get that stocking recommendation, we're pretty much ready for it. And you can see just, average, just under 3 million. Different stages of juveniles were tried out, fed fry, pre-smolt. The hope was that the pre-smolt wouldn't graze on the zooplankton population nearly as much as if you put them in later in the fall, but they found that really wasn't the case, so we strictly do fed fry now. Oh, in total, not including 2016, we put about 74 million juveniles into the lake to date. So the second piece of this is once the fish are in the lake, the following year they're going to migrate out, and our research and monitoring team goes out to Telrod Creek every year, right around the end of April, beginning of May, and they put this big contraption into Telrod Creek. And the schematic here, let me get the arrow. So fish migrate down this way, and we put in these big perforated aluminum walls, line the thing with a tarp because it dewaters a little bit more than what we would really like it to. This helps with increasing the flow. And then the smolt are funneled into these large fan traps, you can see here, all held up by all these steel and aluminum pipes. And then they go into these dewatering tanks, which you see here. And then they'll travel into these pipes, and then they go into a little counting shed. And then our crew is out there for roughly 2.5 months. We have a cabin, and they'll count daily the number of fish migrating from the lake. We usually see fish showing up right around the first part of May. May 10th is when we really start seeing numbers. And about 50% of the fish will migrate in a 5-day period, right? Usually right after Memorial Day, maybe a little bit later into May 30th or so. But that's when we really see the big rush of them. And then they kind of trickle out, and we usually count all the way up to about July 15th. And then we'll just kind of shut it down and call it good. But while they're counting fish, they're also taking subsamples of those fish where they'll anesthetize them. They'll get a scale sample, obviously, so we can age them later, find out which brood year they belong to, get lengths and weights on them, and so forth. So here's our smolt migration counts, again from 92 on. It is pretty variable, but as you saw, we did release fish in variable numbers. We do track the mortality of the fish that we see. Those traps have a tendency to have increased, during times of increased flow, they'll pin fish up against the perf plate, or they'll pin them into the trap itself, and it'll kill them. And we did have some high water events here where we did see, quite a few mortalities. And it's really tapered off here lately, and a lot of that's in part that we've had a lot of warmer winters and not a lot of snow. We've had very few rain events in the last couple summers. It's been really dry, and so we haven't had that high flow coming through there. In fact, the opposite is what we're seeing is low flow. Our mortality is more due to high temperatures in the creeks, low flow, so the fish don't want to go through the trap. They just stay in the creek, or they stay in the dewatering tank. They get tired, or low DO events happen, and then they just die there, and then they come into the shed already dead. So, but it has stayed relatively low, and it's something that we monitor, and if we see it starting to rise, and it is due to high flows or some sort of flowing event in the trap, we do have ways to adjust that up and down. So, and to date, it's roughly about 20 million smolters so have migrated through, and so we're looking at a right under 30% survival. So if we put fish in, about 30% of those fish will survive and migrate out as a smolt on average. And these 2 years combined, when you go back to the brood year that we released, we were seeing upwards of 48% survival on those fish. So when the fish come back to Telrod Cove, we also will have a crew down there camped on the beach, and they will go on usually tenders that are tendering the fish that are harvested by commercial seiners down in Telrod Cove. And they'll get numbers of fish. They'll, again, take scales for these fish, okay, and get lengths and sex, and then we now have started taking otolith samples because the fish coming back for brood year 2012 are otolith marked. Brood year 2012 on are otolith marked. Lake fish are marked differently than fish released in the cove. So just to give you a real quick idea of what we're looking at, so this is Telrod Cove here, so this is where they're sampling, but we also are having outside districts where a lot of these fish are caught by gill nets, set gill nets that are all along through here. Their fish are brought over to a processor here in Larson Bay, and we have a cooperative little agreement with them, and they'll take batches of fish, cut the heads off, and then send them to us in town where our lab folks can extract the otoliths from there. So we have roughly 2,700 samples from outside districts and Telrod Cove this year to analyze to see what the contribution of our fish on the outside is. And this is something we're pretty excited about. This was the very first marked fish that we found this year from brood year 2012. It was a 5.2, and our lab folks found that, and we found quite a few. So we're pretty excited to think that Telrod Cove net pen project is going to be pretty successful. So here's our returns, and all the fish coming back are primarily harvested. We have very few fish that do get into Telrod Creek, and even when they do, they can't ascend to the lake at all. So most of the fish are harvested on the outside, on those outside districts I showed you. It's estimated to be about 60% of those fish are harvested before they even get to Telrod Cove. The other 40% are harvested in Telrod Cove. And recently, a genetic study came out that showed that it may be even larger on the outside. And so if that's the case, these numbers may be even a little more elevated than what we've anticipated. To date, over almost 6 million fish have been harvested due to this project, and so that gives us a smolt to survival rate of about 27%. So outstanding. And if those genetic studies are true, then it could even be greater than that. And that's all I have. So I guess I'm right on time. If you guys have any questions,